He said your name in a room full of people who were not expecting to hear it in that context. Not casually, not in the way that names come up in ordinary conversation, in the specific, slightly weighted way that a name comes up when the person saying it has attached something significant to it. When the saying of it is itself a small declaration, a staking of something, a putting of something into the world that was previously living only in the private space of one person's interior. He said your name, and then he said what comes after your name in his understanding of his own future. And the people in the room heard it. I want to begin with that room, with the specific moment of it, because the fact that it happened in front of witnesses is not a peripheral detail. It is the most important piece of information in this reading, and I want to establish its significance before anything else. There's a difference between a man who thinks something and a man who says it to people who matter to him. The thinking keeps it internal, safe, revisable, available for quiet denial if the thought becomes inconvenient. A thought that lives only in the interior can be walked back without anyone knowing it was ever there. Saying it to the people you trust most in the world, to the friends who have known you across years and who will remember this conversation and who will hold you accountable to it in the gentle, relentless way that close friends hold each other accountable to the things they say in unguarded moments, does something entirely different. It makes it real. Not legally, not officially, but in the specific interpersonal, consequential sense of reality that matters. The sense in which things exist in the world rather than only in the mind, in which they can be witnessed and remembered and returned to, in which saying them commits something that thinking them did not commit. He committed something in that room with your name in his mouth and the people who know him best as witnesses. Let me describe what I am seeing because the image is specific. A group of people in a space that feels relaxed and familiar, not formal, not an occasion that would have called for declarations of any kind. The ordinary, slightly loose atmosphere of people who have known each other long enough that the guard comes down in these gatherings, where things get said that would not get said in other contexts, where the specific loosening of the usual careful management of what you reveal produces moments of unusual honesty. This was one of those moments. He was not planning to say it. That is the detail that I keep coming back to in this image. There was no rehearsal, no building toward a declaration he had prepared in advance. Something in the conversation, some particular thread or turn, created a moment where what has been living in him at high pressure found an opening, and what came through the opening before he had fully decided to let it through was the truth. The truth about you, the truth about where you sit in his understanding of his own life going forward. It came out in the way that truths come out when they have been held under enough pressure for long enough that the container finally gives, not dramatically, not with announcement, simply there, suddenly, in the air of the room, said by someone who, in the moment of saying it, understood it to be real in a way that perhaps even the private thinking had not fully made real until he heard it in his own voice. I want to speak to what he actually said because the title tells you the essential content and I want to give you the texture around it. He did not say, I think I might marry her someday. He did not say, I really like her and I can see this going somewhere. He did not use the language of people who are still in the middle of figuring out what they want. The language of maybe and I think and we will see. He said it with the specific, slightly startling flatness of someone stating a fact. This is what I am going to do. Not a wish, not a hope, not an aspiration framed as a possibility, a statement of intention that carries within it the assumption that the outcome is not in question. The way someone says something about their future when they have already, in the deepest and most settled part of themselves, decided that it is their future. He said it with the specific, slightly startling flatness of someone stating a fact. This is what I am going to do. Not a wish, not a hope, not an aspiration framed as a possibility, a statement of intention that carries within it the assumption that the outcome is not in question. The way someone says something about their future when they have already, in the deepest and most settled part of themselves, decided that it is their future. I want to stay with that flatness for a moment because it is the most significant thing about how this was said. People who are still deciding speak differently from people who have decided. The language of deciding contains qualifiers. It hedges. It creates space for revision. It says things like, I think, and I hope, and I really want this to work, because each of those phrases contains within it the acknowledgement that the outcome is not certain and the speaker knows it. The language of having decided does not do any of that. It simply states, it speaks about the future the way you speak about what you had for breakfast, with the casual certainty of something that has already been established as fact in the speaker's understanding of their own life, without the performance of conviction, because conviction that is genuinely held does not require performance. What he said had that quality. His friends heard it, and they will not forget it. His friends heard that flatness, and they understood it because they know him, because they have been in rooms with this person across years, and they know the difference between the things he says because they sound right and the things he says because they are right, between the performative and the genuine, between someone speaking for effect and someone speaking from a place that does not require effect because it is simply true. What they heard was the second kind, and the specific quality of the quiet that followed it in the room told him that they understood what kind it was. I want to speak to how long he has been holding this, because this was not something that arrived recently. The way he said it, the flatness, the absence of the tentative quality that accompanies things that are still forming, tells me this has been settled in him for a significant stretch of time. Long enough that the weight of it has become something he carries with a certain ease. That has become part of the furniture of how he thinks about his own life, rather than an exciting new piece of information he is still processing. He has known for a while, not in the anxious, am I sure way of someone who keeps revisiting the question to make certain the answer has not changed. In the specific, almost boring certainty of someone for whom the question was answered a significant time ago and who has simply been living with the answer since. The answer is you. It has been for longer than he said it out loud tonight. Tonight was not the forming of the certainty. Tonight was the first time the certainty moved from the private space of his own knowing into the shared space of being known by others. Let me speak to his friends, because their reaction to what he said carries its own information that I think matters for how you understand the full picture. They were not surprised. Not in the way they would have been surprised if this had come entirely from nowhere, if he had said something that contradicted everything they had observed about him in relation to you. They were surprised by the specificity of it, by the directness, by the absence of the usual hedging that men of his type tend to produce when the conversation approaches territory this significant, but not surprised that it was you, because they have been watching. They have been in the rooms where both of you have been present, and they have noticed things. The specific quality of how he tracks you without appearing to track you, the way his energy changes subtly but visibly when you enter or leave a space, the specific attentiveness that he brings to conversations about you or involving you that is different from how he engages with other topics, the things he says about you in your absence that are more considered, more specific, more carefully observed than what people say about someone they are casually interested in. They have been watching all of that, and what he said tonight confirmed what the watching had already suggested to them. They have been watching all of that, and what he said tonight confirmed what the watching had already suggested to them. I want to describe what that confirmation felt like in the room because I think the texture of it tells you something about the quality of what was said. There was a moment of quiet, not awkward quiet, the specific, slightly reverent quiet that arrives in a group of people when someone has just said something genuinely true and the group is collectively absorbing the truth of it. The kind of quiet that happens when the atmosphere of a room shifts and everyone in it is aware of the shift before anyone has processed what produced it. And then someone said something, a response, probably something that contained humor in the way that certain groups of friends respond to the large and sincere things with a lightness that is not dismissal but protection. A way of honoring what was said by making the weight of it briefly smaller so that everyone can breathe again. But underneath the humor, underneath whatever lightness the room produced in response, something else was happening. Each person in that room was updating their understanding of him, of you, of what exists between you that they may have been observing as a possibility and are now receiving as an intention. And the updating produced in each of them a particular private quality of rooting for you both, of wanting the thing he named to become the thing it is. That room is now quietly, collectively in your corner. And tell me in the comments if you feel this, if somewhere in the reading of this a specific person's energy has been present, if there have been moments in your experience of this person where you caught something beneath the surface that matched what I am describing, the tracking that pretends not to be tracking, the attentiveness that does not announce itself as significant, but that you have felt anyway. I want to know how this is landing for you. I want to speak to something that I think is the piece of this reading you most need to hear. Not about him, about what this means. He is not someone who says things he does not mean. I feel that clearly in his energy. The specific, almost stubborn quality of someone who has a relationship with his own words that requires them to be accurate before they are offered, who does not produce declarations for effect or for the warmth they generate in a room or for the version of himself they create in other people's minds, who has learned through whatever his specific experience has taught him to be careful with what he claims. He was careful with this. He sat with it long enough to be certain before he let it out of the interior space where certainties develop before they are ready to be shared. He said it in the moment it became too true to keep contained, rather than in the moment it felt exciting to say. He said it to the people who will hold him to it, rather than to strangers who will not remember it. All of those qualities of how this was said are the qualities of something that will not be retracted in the morning. This is not a thing said in a moment of feeling. It is a thing said from a place of knowing. I want to speak to what you may be sitting with as you receive this, because this reading, unlike many others, delivers something that can be simultaneously wonderful and slightly destabilizing to receive. Being the person someone intends to marry, specifically named in a room full of his closest people, before the conversation between you has arrived at this place explicitly, is a particular kind of being held. It carries a weight that is not entirely comfortable, not because it is bad, because it is large, because it places something in your hands that has significance before you have had the explicit conversation in which significance was formally established, because it invites you into a future that he has already been inhabiting privately and that you are only now learning exists. That invitation can feel like a gift and like a responsibility simultaneously. And both of those responses are completely appropriate. I want to say that clearly. You do not have to land in one emotion about this. The size of it is allowed to be the size of it. The complexity of receiving this kind of information, of knowing what someone has said about you in rooms you were not present in, is real. And you are allowed to sit in that complexity for as long as it takes to understand what you actually feel about it, rather than moving immediately to what you think you are supposed to feel. And you are allowed to sit in that complexity for as long as it takes to understand what you actually feel about it, rather than moving immediately to what you think you are supposed to feel. I want to add something to this that I think is specific and important. The knowledge that someone has already decided something this significant about you before the explicit conversation in which you would have participated in the deciding creates a very particular kind of position. You are head of the official version of things. You know something that you have not yet been formally told. You are holding information about the shape of his intentions that he has not yet directly given you, but that has reached you anyway. And this means that when the conversation eventually comes, when he finally brings to you what he has already placed in the world with his friends as witnesses, you will be receiving it with a different quality of awareness than he knows you are receiving it with. That asymmetry is not a problem. It does not require you to perform surprise you do not feel or to pretend the information never reached you. What it does require is a certain kind of honesty with yourself about what you feel when you sit with the full reality of what he has said and meant and decided. Not what you think about it, what you feel, because the response that will matter most in that eventual conversation is not the response you have calculated in advance. It is the response that arrives from the honest, unmanaged place of someone who knows what they want and what this means to them. Find that response now in the quiet of your own interior before the conversation creates the pressure of needing to find it in real time. Let me speak to what comes next in his energy. Because the saying of it to his friends was not the destination, it was the preparation for a destination. He is building toward the conversation with you, not rushing, not with the frantic energy of someone who has finally said the thing out loud and now needs to act on it immediately before the courage dissipates, with the specific, deliberate pace of someone who has been clear about the what for a significant time and is now working on the how, on the specific form of the conversation, on the right moment, on the version of this that honors what he feels rather than simply discharging the pressure of having said it to other people first. He wants to get this right. Not perfect. There is no perfect version of a conversation this significant, but right in the sense of genuine, in the sense of it being an expression of what is actually true rather than a performance of what he has decided he is supposed to say. in the sense of it arriving in a way that allows you to receive it as real rather than as a gesture that might or might not have depth behind it. The depth is there. It has been there for a long time. What he is figuring out is how to make that visible to you in a way that matches what he already knows is visible to himself. As we close, I want to give you the full image. A man who told his friends he is going to marry you, not as a dream, as an intention. With the flatness of someone stating something true rather than something hoped for. In a room where the people who know him best heard it and understood immediately that it was the second kind of thing rather than the first. And a conversation that is being prepared, that is being held at the level of care that a conversation this significant deserves to be held at. That will arrive not in the moment he feels most ready, because there is no moment of perfect readiness for something this large, but in the moment when continuing to hold it back is no longer possible. That moment is closer than you know. And when it arrives, Virgo, I want you to remember this reading. Not to have prepared a response, not to have managed your reaction into something appropriate, but simply to know that what you are hearing was true before he said it to you, that it was true when he said it to his friends, that it has been true in the private space of his knowing for longer than either conversation has existed, that the man standing in front of you has already, in the most settled and certain part of himself, decided, and he decided it was you.